They said the hype would fade. They said the moment had passed. They said the world would move on. But it didn't. It sold out. Again. And now, for the third time, not quietly, not locally, but across borders, languages, and time zones. This wasn't supposed to happen. Because this time, there was no loud promotion, no aggressive push, no endless media cycle forcing attention. And yet, everything disappeared. Tickets, products, spaces meant for millions. So the question isn't what sold out. The question is why it keeps happening. Because behind this third sellout is a story few expected to continue. At first, even insiders were cautious. Some called it momentum from the past. Others said it was leftover loyalty, a wave that would eventually crash. They pointed to silence, to long gaps, to the absence of constant exposure. They waited for numbers to slow, for demand to soften, for attention to drift elsewhere. Instead, demand grew quieter and stronger. This wasn't noise. This was pressure building underneath. Every release, every appearance, every move. People watched closely, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. And that difference matters. Because attention forced never lasts. But attention chosen, that changes everything. Jungkook didn't arrive at this moment untouched. There were years of expectations placed on his shoulders. Not just to perform, but to represent, to lead, to be flawless. And when expectations are that high, doubt always follows. Some questioned his direction. Some questioned his timing. Some questioned whether global interest would stay without constant presence. They spoke softly at first, then louder. But Jungkook never answered with words. He answered with consistency. With discipline no one saw behind the scenes. With pressure he carried quietly. With nights that didn't make headlines. While others chased visibility, he refined intention. And that intention showed. Because the third sellout didn't come from hype. It came from trust. Trust built over years. Across cultures. Across people who didn't even speak the same language. They didn't rush in because of trends. They arrived because they believed. Believed in the voice. Believed in the presence. Believed in the sincerity. And belief travels faster than marketing ever could. KMedia didn't frame this as a surprise for nothing. Because a third sellout is no longer coincidence. It's a pattern. A pattern that says something deeper is happening. This isn't about charts alone. Or rankings. Or numbers on a screen. It's about demand that survives silence. About relevance that doesn't need reminders. About an artist whose name alone still moves people to act. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time when Jungkook stood in the shadow of expectations larger than himself. When every step was measured against something else. When mistakes felt unforgivable. And that kind of pressure breaks many. But he stayed. He listened. He learned. He endured. And slowly, the world noticed something different. Not louder. Not flashier. Deeper. A connection that didn't depend on trends. A presence that felt human, not manufactured. That's why the third sellout hit harder than the first. Because by now, people weren't reacting. They were choosing. Choosing to show up. Choosing to invest time. Choosing to believe again. And belief, once earned, multiplies. Still, skepticism lingered. Some asked how long it could last. Some wondered if demand would finally plateau. Some waited for the decline they were sure would come. But then it sold out. Again. No dramatic announcement. No countdown fueled by noise. Just confirmation. Everything gone. And suddenly, the narrative shifted. This wasn't about whether Jungkook could maintain global interest. It was about understanding why he never lost it. Because true global demand isn't loud. It's steady. It doesn't chase. It pulls. It doesn't beg for attention. It commands it naturally. And that's what this third sellout represents. Not a spike. A foundation. Years of trust condensed into a single moment where the world responded at once. Different countries. Different cultures. Same decision. Yes, we're still here. That kind of unity doesn't happen by accident. It's built through vulnerability people recognize, through effort people feel, through authenticity that survives distance. Jungkook didn't try to convince the world he mattered. He showed it, one step at a time. And now, the result is impossible to ignore. KMedia didn't call it a phenomenon lightly. Because phenomena don't repeat themselves this cleanly. Unless something fundamental has changed. This third sellout wasn't louder than the first. It was heavier, because it carried history, and expectation, and proof. Proof that global demand doesn't always fade. Sometimes it matures. Sometimes it waits. And when it moves again, it moves together. This moment answers the doubts left hanging for years. Not with argument, not with defense, but with reality. And the reality is simple. When Jungkook steps forward, the world still responds. Not because of who he was, but because of who he continues to be. And that's the part no one can manufacture. No strategy can replace it. No trend can replicate it. It's earned. This third sellout isn't the end of a story. It's a signal. That silence doesn't mean absence. That patience doesn't mean decline. That true connection doesn't expire. It waits. And when the moment comes, it fills everything. Again. And what makes this moment heavier is not the speed of the sellout. It's the silence before it. Because silence is where doubt lives. Silence is where people assume interest is gone. Where they think attention has shifted. Where they believe the spotlight has moved on. Many artists disappear there. But Jungkook didn't. He stayed present without forcing presence. He stayed relevant without chasing relevance. And that balance is rare. There were moments when expectations felt unfair. When every move was dissected. When every pause became a question. Why now? Why this direction? Why the quiet? Some mistook restraint for hesitation. Some mistook patience for weakness. But patience was never weakness. It was preparation. Behind the calm surface was constant refinement. A voice trained through repetition. A mindset shaped by pressure. Because global attention doesn't forgive mistakes easily. And Jungkook knew that. He didn't rush the moment. He waited for it to be ready. And when it arrived, the response was immediate. That's the part many miss. This third sellout wasn't sparked by surprise. It was sparked by confidence. Confidence from the audience. From fans who had watched the journey unfold slowly. They remembered the early days. The uncertainty. The growth. They saw not just talent, but endurance. And endurance builds trust deeper than hype ever could. There's a reason global demand didn't fracture over time. Because Jungkook never presented himself as unreachable. He remained human. Moments of doubt were never hidden. Moments of effort were never exaggerated. That honesty crossed borders. People felt it. And when people feel something real, they respond without being asked. That's why the third sellout felt different. It wasn't chaotic. It was decisive. No confusion. No hesitation. Just action. Everything gone. And suddenly, conversations changed. Not about whether he could still pull global demand, but about how quietly powerful that demand had become. Because loud success burns fast, but quiet success lasts. And this was lasting. Some tried to downplay it, calling it predictable, calling it expected. But predictability doesn't erase significance. Consistency at this scale is rare, especially in a global space, where attention resets every day. Yet Jungkook remained, not as a trend, but as a presence. That presence didn't need constant reminders. It lived in memory, in playlists, in shared moments, in emotional attachment built over time. That's why the third sellout didn't need convincing. It felt natural, almost inevitable. Because when people truly connect, distance stops mattering, time stops weakening impact, and loyalty stops being fragile. This moment also carried something else. Relief. Relief for those who believed quietly, who trusted the process, who waited without demanding proof every step. This sellout validated them too. It said their faith wasn't misplaced. Their patience wasn't wasted. And for Jungkook, it marked a turning point. Not a breakthrough, but a confirmation that he didn't need to shout to be heard, didn't need to rush to be relevant, didn't need to compromise to stay visible. The world was still listening, still watching, still responding. KMedia didn't frame this as a coincidence. Because it was. 3 times is no longer chance. It's a statement about how global demand evolves, when it's built on trust instead of noise. And this statement didn't come from numbers alone. It came from emotion, from people choosing connection over novelty, choosing meaning over momentum. And that choice is powerful, because once the world chooses you freely, it doesn't leave easily. This third sellout closed a chapter of doubt. Not dramatically, not loudly, but decisively. It answered questions without arguing. It silenced skepticism without confrontation. And it did so the same way Jungkook always has. By letting the work speak. By letting the moment arrive on its own. And when it did, the response was global. That's the real story behind this moment. Not the sellout itself, but what it represents. A demand that didn't fade.